Right, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, a very warm welcome on this cold Thursday. We hope we've been able to keep you somewhat warmish. Hope you all have a drink and just settle down. I am Tshepiso Makwetla. I'll be your moderator, your facilitator for the launch, for the discussion today. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us here physically. And let's also welcome those who are streaming live on Facebook. Really appreciate it. I mean, it's a momentous occasion. Read Expo Africa, launching the Future Manufacturing Africa Trade Fair Summit. It's going to happen next year, but it's one of those exciting projects that Reed is involved in. We'll hear a little bit more about that from Carol from a global perspective, but Reed Expo Africa is involved with about 400 events. Can you imagine? 43 sectors, 22 countries, and this is all in person, virtual, and we're really excited about this upcoming event. It'll be the first of a series of launches that'll happen, obviously, firstly here in South Africa, and we're hoping to cover other regions of the continent as well. So before we continue with what you are to expect from the event, who will be participating, let me first welcome and recognize our dignitaries who are joining us today, representing their countries. The Embassy of the Republic of Burundi in South Africa, His Excellency Ambassador Alexis Bukuru. Thank you so much for joining us. The Embassy of the Kingdom of Morocco, His Excellency Ambassador Yusuf Amrani. And we have Ragi Nabil Adli Hana, the Commercial Counselor of the Embassy of Egypt. Also acknowledging Nigeria's Minister of Trade and Industry, Mrs. Ijeoma Nwezu, representing Nigeria in South Africa, as well as Nigeria's Trade and Investment Officer, Mr. Etabi Eraze, and Umaru Shehu Adudu. Welcome to you as well, including the Central Africa Republic Trade Advisor, Mr. Ferdinand Roger Ekomo. And from Tanzania, we've got the Trade Advisor, Mr. Deogratius Dotto, welcome, and our speakers, some of whom are already here, others will join us shortly. Advocate Mtokulu, Elias Monache, Barbara Mallinson, George Sibulela, Dr. Shahed Fazluddin, Deli Naidu, as well as Nandi Aba. Thank you really for taking the time to join us and share your expertise with us today. So, as we mentioned, this will be the first in a series of launches. The big fair is going to happen later on. RX Africa brings you. It is the Future Manufacturing Africa Trade Fair Summit. It'll happen next year from the 9th to the 11th of May 2023. And what we're hoping to do here is to facilitate opportunities, not only to generate jobs, but growth, income, a source of wealth, and social development. The FMA is going to be the only trade show on the continent that will be focusing on the full manufacturing value chain. Not only on the African continent, there will be international partners, but we're hoping to produce a platform for global companies who want to introduce new innovations and solutions to strategic manufacturing decision makers from Africa, whom either have time to invest or want to build new manufacturing plants, or even procure the latest innovations in technology, in equipment, turnkey solutions to improve the existing production output and capacity. So that's just a snippet of what the thinking is behind it. Let's cast a look at this video that'll give us a sense of what else is in the works. So as you can see, exciting stuff, various industries that will be involved. And I mean, if you look at your little pamphlet that you've got there, you will see not only the key economic manufacturing countries, the key product drivers as well are in there. And we've also noted in some of that we are already, as Reed Expo Africa, in conversation with 400 exhibiting companies. So they'll be participating in this. They already have received endorsement from countries such as the Zambia Manufacturers Associations, Kenyan Chamber of Commerce and Industries, Nigeria's Association of Manufacturers, and these also include discussions with the Democratic Republic of Congo and Côte d'Ivoire. So you'll hear a little bit more about that, including organizations like the Black Business Council that are here today to endorse it, Kenya Chambers, as we mentioned, the Confederation of Tanzanian Industries. There's an MOU with countries that is in the works, countries such as Egypt, Ecuador, South Sudan, Italy, Taiwan, Africa, business associations. I'm going to just ask that perhaps my mic be turned down a little bit. There's a lot of popping. So let me just step away for a moment so that Carol Weaving, the Reed Expo Africa Managing Director, can just give you a sense of the global undertakings and wish you a warm welcome as well. Please give her a warm round of applause.
Great, thanks so much, Sapito. A very warm welcome this afternoon. Great turnout, so thank you very much. We have a lot of people watching us live through Facebook for the live streaming. For us, it's important that we're inclusive and that we allow everybody to join this and to see what we're doing. You've got some very exciting panelists this afternoon, so I'm really here to welcome you, to thank you for attending, to our partners, to the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to the BBC, Black Business Council, and all of our other partners and stakeholders. We really appreciate your input. As Reed Expo Africa, we are now actually rebranded as RX Africa. And the reason being, we're a multi-channel organization, so we don't just deliver events and exhibitions. We believe in keeping in contact with our community on a 365 basis and offering additional value. And I think that is the way of the world post-COVID. And I think you'll see the benefits as we go along. Now, a year seems a long way out, but believe me, that year will go very quickly. I think what's fantastic is we're way ahead of the curve. We already have a lot of international participation. We've got France. Since this video was made, actually, we have France, we have Germany. We have so many other international countries and African countries. And we're busy signing agreements with Nigeria, with Kenya, with Tanzania, a whole host of other African countries. So it's really exciting. We've done a lot of groundwork. As I said, we're very passionate about developing a platform where not only jobs are created, which is critical, and the manufacturing sector, certainly in Africa, is really, I think, one of our gateways to recovery on the continent. So it's really important, I think, that for us, these platforms not only give an opportunity for people to come and invest or buy equipment, buy technology, because ultimately that's what it's about, so that they can create, they can increase their production output in manufacturing. And that's why it's so critical on the African continent. It really is, I think, an opportunity for each and every one of us. At RX Africa, we are a global company. As Sapisa said, we have offices all over the world. And Gauteng has been awarded this event. As I said, it's a global. We do have this show happening in Japan, in Thailand, in India, amongst others. So it's really exciting times for us to be able to bring it to you. Not only do we have the summit, but it's also an educational. There's a lot of information exchange that happens during these summits. And it's really a good opportunity for B2B business meetings, for B2G business meetings. And there's a whole array of opportunities that are happening at the event. My entire team is here. So, you know, after the panel discussion, please feel free to talk to Adele, Chardonnay, who I know a lot of you already know, for Pappy, for Trevor, Daleen, Rolene. We have a really big team, so any questions that you have, please feel free to talk to the entire team afterwards. RX Africa is in the business of building businesses. We create platforms to facilitate trade and investment. It's as simple as that. Then it's up to you, but we make sure that we guide you every step of the way and make sure we give you that opportunity. So that's it from me, just a nice warm welcome, and thank you very much indeed for your patience, and thank you for joining us. And as I said, we're very passionate and excited about helping develop and grow the sector, which is critical for our recovery. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Carol. And as you've mentioned, the partnerships are across the value chains, and this is why you have chosen speakers who have experience in this. I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Advocate Mtoxulu, who's the president of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He's also a member of the Institute of Directors in South Africa, director of the Small Enterprise Development Agency, CEDA, a former director of Business Unity South Africa, a member of BRICS Business Council Deregulation Working Group, a member of the National Governing Council on the African Peer Review Mechanism, and also serving as chairman of the Corporate Governance Workstream. So he'll be dealing with what Africa is doing, and is it really bursting with investment opportunities in the manufacturing sector? What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? What can we capitalize on to get that competitive edge? Ladies and gentlemen, if I could please ask you to bring Advocate Mtoxulu up to the stage with a warm round of applause as well.
Thank you, Tsepiso. Program Director, thank you very much for that warm welcome. And Carol, colleagues, leaders of private companies in attendance, leaders of organized business formations, associations of manufacturing companies throughout the value chain, both locally and globally, in attendance with us here and virtually. Individual entrepreneurs and manufacturers, leaders and representatives of governments and regulators from South Africa and other African states and potential exhibitors from other nations. Ladies and gentlemen, receive my greetings in this very exciting event post all the challenges that we've faced over the past few years, and which we hope that can be part of those events that will set us up for an exciting future of African prosperity. As the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we are delighted to be sharing this moment with all of you today on the occasion of the media launch of the 2023 version of Future Manufacturing Africa Trade Fair and Summit, co-located with the Africa Automation Technology Fair, scheduled to take place in May 2023. We, as Organized Business Formation, are happy that the launch is also taking place in such an early time, because with such an event, with its potential and impact, we look forward to more detailed engagements over the next few months. And I think later on, an announcement will be made on the various supporters of this event. And we are hoping to have more detailed engagement with yourselves as we prepare for the main event that will take place mid next year. We commend both the organizers and participants of today's event for their courage in taking personal responsibility in this trajectory-defining affairs of Africa's manufacturing and industrialization future. We believe that it is this kind of honest stakeholder collaborations that will deliver the Africa that we want with the economy that we deserve. Our participation in this initiative as SACI is ideal, given the synergies between the mandate of the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the objectives of the FMA. Primarily, SACI seeks to advance the interests of the African economy through collaborative economic policy lobby that will lead to enhanced vertical and horizontal integration of global trade and investment for the protection of private sector member interests on the continent. And like FMA, We subscribe to the conviction which we hope that this event will contribute to, and that is the attainment of the AU vision of an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the international arena. As we gather here today, we should appreciate that we are not only launching a trade fair and summit. No, I saw Carol putting it very simplistic, that it's just a facilitation of a conversation. We believe that this kind of a launch should also be the start of the Pan-African mobilization of a distinct cohort of cutting-edge entrepreneurs, reliable policymakers, honest regulators, and development-oriented financiers and collaborative international partners, all committed to the singular mission to build a sustainable, integrated, and prosperous manufacturing and industrialization reality in Africa that is a dynamic force in the international arena. It is therefore our view that the intended manufacturing landscape that we seek to support with this kind of initiative and we are pursuing through this launch and hosting of the FMA cannot be separated from the need for rapid industrialization, socio-economic justice, and regional integration. So as we look at manufacturing from an organized business point of view, we don't see just the statistics and the big numbers that are spoken about, but we believe that we must be intentional about how we drive manufacturing in Africa that assists us to rapidly industrialize and make sure that that industrialization is supported and serviced by African manufacturers. In the process, obviously, given our unique history, we look forward to a manufacturing future that helps us to restore the socio-economic justice on the continent. Because it's one thing to look at Africa as a market opportunity, but it also has its own deep challenges. And those of us who are from the continent and who claim to be taking the lead on manufacturing in Africa need to understand that ours is to build a prosperous manufacturing industry that is also making sure that we have a more stable economic landscape throughout the continent. And what then eventually will do is to lead to stronger regional integration that will support all the decisions that we are taking about strengthening intra-Africa trade. Because all those conversations about how do you grow the single market will need a lot of industrialization and manufacturing. So it's not just about us being manufacturers operating in silos, targeting opportunities in our various verticals, but it's also about how do we drive this integration so that we don't continue to moan about how we are not able to get our goods and services to different parts of Africa, but how do we use manufacturing as a driver for that regional integration. So a lot of material has been discussed. I know Tsepiso said we'll talk about those numbers, but I think they are well published and well publicized after the launching of the single market on the opportunities that we have. So I'm not going to recite those stats again because I think you are well aware of them. And all that has been well published about manufacturing in Africa across all our 54 nations, but also in various economic centers around the world. Because Africa is definitely going to be the next growth frontier. But what we need to understand is that there are others who are seeing it as just an opportunity. We're seeing it as an economy. So, and that may be a big distinction, but we will have to take the lead on how we discuss and make sure that these opportunities become a reality. FMA itself highlights the fact that, and I quote, business-to-business spend in manufacturing in Africa is projected to reach $666 billion US by 2030. That is over 200 billion more than it was spent in 2015. This growth will not only be as a result of established economies on the continent, but also the emerging economies entering the manufacturing industry. This projected growth makes it attractive for investors in building new manufacturing plants to increase trade within the continent. So I think this is just one part of a snippet of all the numbers that we are throwing around. However, such statistics, whether historical or projected, make Africa a natural center of massive opportunities in upstream and downstream linkages in, as well as vertical and horizontal integrations of value chains of manufacturing and industrialization. So there's no question about the opportunities. I think the most important thing is that how do we as participants in this room and virtually and the ultimate participants in this fair, do we understand the upstream and downstream linkages of manufacturing, and what will vertical and horizontal integration mean amongst our various players on the continent, and on what level are we going to be crowding in international solutions to be part of this vision that we are building as Africans on the continent. So it is a bigger conversation than just simply a fair that will take place next year. It's also defining what we understand about manufacturing and what kind of face are we going to be giving manufacturing in the world. So I speak of upstream and downstream linkages as well as vertical and horizontal integrations because of the unique socio-economic circumstances that we find ourselves in Africa, which in itself challenges us to look at manufacturing not only as an economic sector, but that one that must be handled as a driver for continental civilization. So to this end, as the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the broader organized business community look forward to the Future Manufacturing Africa event, and we expect that its organizers, participants, and stakeholders will bring to the fore an advantage point in our maturity of the African manufacturing landscape by focusing and assisting us in driving areas of development in 9 areas, namely strategy, standardization, integration, transformation, systemization, training and development, roles and responsibilities among stakeholders, knowledge management, and results and tracking, so that we can always know exactly what we mean about cross-border trade, what we mean about manufacturing and the various pockets of strengths of manufacturing. All this will have to be a science-driven approach to manufacturing in Africa, so that we are able to develop it in such a way that we can take accountability for it. Therefore, in conclusion, Program Director, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to conclude by laying a challenge for us through a quote from an African scholar, which says, and I quote, "Alone, I am nothing, I have nothing. We have power, but we will never know it. We will never see it work unless if we come together and make it work." Close quote. So let us work together as collaborative stakeholders to make the future of African manufacturing work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Advocate Xolu. As you said, that we need to move away from the thinking within silos, that we have to take advantage of the intra-Africa free trade area, and we have to move away from the thinking of caging ourselves in what we are major producers of. So we will be, during our discussions, talking about the sectors that we're going to be focusing on: food and beverages, textile and apparel, plastic, metals, minerals, paper, chemicals, rubber, automobile. And we know that there are certain countries who are known to be bellwethers of some of these industries. I mean, the fact that with what's going on in Europe, the high skyrocketing price of edible oils, it's time that we start thinking about whether or not, as South Africa, this is an area that we need to scale up. In 15.5 billion rand, I think that's what we recorded in terms of trade this April in South Africa. And the question is, how do we make use of the free trade area agreement to improve this, as you say, better capacitate entrepreneurs as well? Advocate Xolu, thank you so much for speaking to us from the perspective of the South African Chamber of Commerce. So over 10,000 delegates from across the African continent will have complimentary access to both shows. What we're talking about here is this 3-day conference, Future of Manufacturing Africa Trade Fair Summit. It's next year, It will involve all the heartbeat industries in Africa. Africa Automation Fair will also be involved, and it's helped to transform others to meet the needs of industries elsewhere. So let's hear now from our next speaker how the Black Business Council would like to help support this effort. Our next speaker is Mr. Elias Monache, who's the president of the Association Postal Service Organization, president of CAPES, as well as the president and chairman of the board of SAFSA. He sits on the boards of various committees, including the National Skills Authority, Arabella Holdings, Employment Services Board, and BRICS Business Council, to share his thoughts on why the Black Business Council is behind this venture. Ladies and gentlemen, please give him a warm round of applause.
Thanks, Madam Moderator. Excellencies from various embassies present here today, my colleagues from various business organizations, I've seen George Sibulela, I've seen President of the BBC BE, and many others that I've greeted them when I arrived here. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think for me, it will be appropriate to perhaps to use a metaphor so that we are all aligned, because part of the problem from time to time is an acceptance and acknowledgement that as a continent, we don't work together. And I'm saying, in the absence of that acknowledgement and acceptance that we don't do things jointly, collectively, we don't integrate some of our work, and I'm saying that's part of the issues that we need then to address and deal with going forward, because as a continent, we tend to consume than manufacturing. And I'm saying that is the starting point. And hence I'm saying the metaphor that I want to use is basically to say Africa is a sleeping giant. And I'm saying that is the metaphor that I want to use, so that if we have a giant that is sleeping, and the giant does not even recognize and accept its role in the global space, the giant does not even accept and recognize that there are certain things that while you are sleeping, things they don't wait for you. Because we might move from conference to conference, from summit to summit, but if that tendency continues then to perpetuate, we are not addressing the real issues that we are faced with as a continent. One of the issues is that for manufacturing to drive economic growth, it requires leadership, it requires us to accept that we need then to do things differently. From the AU, we have a program or an agenda called 2063. Over and above that, we have an agreement that all African countries have concluded, because it was then triggered by the debate and discussions within the African Union that led to the Africa Free Continental Agreement. That agreement accepts and acknowledges that we have different standards, regulation within the 54, 55 countries. And that then becomes a limitation and a prohibitor for us then to do things jointly and collectively as a continent. Now, part of the problem, again, is because we don't work jointly, we don't align, we don't share IP, we don't share research and development, and that's part of the issues that I'm saying. For us then to talk about manufacturing in Africa as a drive for economic growth, we need then to address those issues. And the reason why I'm raising that point is because within the context of the continent, because anyone that fly into the continent, when you look at that map, it's as if we are united, we are one block, and we are not. We have different languages that we are using, and that should not be an excuse. We have different standards that each and every country they conform to, and part of the rationale for the Africa Free Continental Agreement, it is an attempt to unify the continent so that we then do things and we align in terms of various aspects of trade in any form or shape. And I guess that is the point that I'm saying. We need then to address the question of doing things together, the alignment, collaboration, complementarity, so that at the heart of the growth, we then move as one unit, because part of that includes us, how then do we relate to each other in various platforms. And I think the point that I'm raising is that in as much as you want them to look at Africa in different countries, in different pockets, South Africa, as we are sitting in the south, we have a huge manufacturing base in terms of steel, in terms of other various sectors. But again, we need them to look at complementarity with the continent. We need them to look at alignment with other countries so that the colleagues from Kenya, when they grow the coffee beans, how then do we then utilize that for the benefit of the entire continent? And how do we then support each other? How do we integrate other things that are done by either Sierra Leone in terms of their mining capabilities and competence so that our manufacturing in mining is then complementing what is happening in other parts of the continent. And I guess the point that I'm raising, colleagues, is that one, we need them to look at alignment, we need them to look at complementarity, we need them to look at uniformity in terms of standards, we need them to look at the question of harmonization of tariffs, because we cannot then have 55 different tariff regime in one continent, and that becomes a barrier for trade. And I guess the intention then of the Africa Free Trade Agreement is then premise in terms of dealing and addressing the question of harmonization of those tariffs, including the question of standards. Because we cannot then talk about manufacturing as a driver for growth, but again, we don't want them to deal with the protocols, we don't want to deal with tariff harmonization, we don't want them to deal with the aspect that deals with the movement of people, because part of the movement of people, again, it deals with the regulatory environment to say those government officials that they regulate the movement of people, whether it can be home affairs, it can be custom officials, we need then to find in harmonization in terms of the movement of people so that Africa, as a giant, for the first time, it will then take its rightful place in a global area in terms of manufacturing. One of the other things that, colleagues, I guess we need also to look at is the positioning, because we might then lose the positioning because South Africa is part of the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, in terms of trade issues. And again, if we're then to use the numbers, I mean, 48% of the world population is within the BRICS countries. But to what extent are we then, as South Africa, using the entire continent to participate into the BRICS configuration with our 1.3 billion people, so that we then turn things around from being the consumers, then we then become the manufacturing hub of BRICS countries. I mean, we talk about energy. We have the sun in the continent. How effectively they want to use a different energy mix so that we then generate a power, whether we use water, we use waste, whether we then use other areas, whether it can be nuclear, it can be hydro. Those are some of the issues that we need then to look at as part of the manufacturing. And yes, of course, some of the issues that colleagues we need to address per sectors is around what as a country we've done to date, where we have sector plans. And those sector plans, their intention is basically to address, one, the capacity and the competency of various sectors to participate in the global arena so that the manufacturing and the services within the country is then realized even within the continent. And equally so, if we're then to use the Africa Free Trade Continental Agreement, it then gives us an entry level in addressing the limitations and the constraints on education, skills transfer, so that we need then to have those issues so that the future of work, it then follows the trend of manufacturing, because the way you manufacture things today and the next coming 5 years is not going to be the same, it's different because of the movement of technology. And then I'm saying those are some of the issues. And I think for us from the Black Business Council, it is, I guess, an honor and a privilege to participate in this fora today, including even other engagements that they're going to take place so that we then raise sharply the issues around manufacturing, trade, services, the movement of people, and also the participation in broader forums like the BRICS Business Councils, including even whether it's the G7, the G20, we need to have an African agenda. But to date, we don't have such a thing. I mean, I just want then to conclude on two things, Madam Moderator. If you were to ask anyone, what is the African agenda in G7, G20, the BRICS? There is none. Because we hardly then talk about what do we want and what are the issues that we want to deal with in terms of our own continent in the participation in the broader fora. For example, China, they've established what is called FOCAC, is the Fora for Africa China Summit, but it's then triggered by South Africa. But rest assured, the entire 54 countries, we don't have one single and common agenda. But China, they know exactly where they stand, what they want to achieve. And today you go to each and every country in the continent, you find the Chinese, they're doing business in one form or another. But we as the Africans, we in the continent, we don't have a single uniform, aligned agenda and program that we want them to engage China as a bloc. And I'm saying those are some of the lessons that we need them to look at. Equally so, we then look at what Russia they've done 2 years ago. They've established what is called Russia-Africa Fora, but it's triggered by Ghana. But again, we don't have a common program in terms of engaging Russia, whether in terms of oil, in terms of gas, in terms of agricultural products and manufacturing. And I'm saying these are some of the issues that as a continent, we need basically to wake up as the giant that is leaping so that we then see and smell the coffee that countries, they're not going to wait for us to wake up. And I'm saying the call that I'm making is that we need them to work together as a continent, whether from embassy to embassy, from business to business. We need them to forge ahead in dealing with this issue so that an agenda for Africa is then pursued in different forums. I thank you, Madam and colleagues.
Thank you very much, Mr. Monache. Much appreciated for sharing your perspectives on that. And no doubt all of you, not only having been part of the South African community, but within the manufacturing community, you would also know that the industry is not untouched by climate change and the challenges and risks that it faces. And that's why it's important to have business people, policymakers share their perspectives on the innovative ways in which we can approach this. And the Future Manufacturing Africa Trade, as we mentioned earlier on, the trade fair and summit will be looking to provide a platform for global solution providers to introduce not only new innovations and solutions, but also strategic manufacturing decision makers from the African continent who either want to make or invest in building new manufacturing plants, procure the latest innovations in technology, equipment, turnkey solutions. So they will be very much part of those building of regulations, areas such as steel production, cement, paper, chemical operations, we know will be affected by these acts of God, as have been said. We saw the impact on our economy with what happened in KwaZulu-Natal. So let's change tack and now look at things from a different perspective. Some of you may or may not be familiar with this. Let me introduce my next speaker, Ms. Barbara Mallison. She's the CEO of Obami Create, Monetize, Analyze. So she's been recognized by UNESCO as one of 21 people around the world for changing the world. That's a huge feat. She's a founder of Obami, as we mentioned. It's a digital platform. It's delivered online experiences to more than 1 million people across the continent. So she has been identified as one of South Africa's top entrepreneurs and women in business. So she'll share her perspectives and she'll engage us on how you can use digital experiences to enhance your brand, to engage with customers, staff, shareholders, and stakeholders. So ladies and gentlemen, please bring her up on stage with a warm round of applause.
All right, thank you so much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, special guests, event organizers, all of you here today. What an honor it is to be part of this, the launch event for the Future of Manufacturing Africa Trade Summit, Fair and Trade Summit for next year that's happening in May. I must say I feel incredibly honored to be part of this. The excitement is palpable. I think that it's really going to be something truly fabulous. But I have a disclaimer to make, is that this is not my usual gig. You are not my usual audience. So to stand up here and feel like I have something of value to share with an audience full of manufacturers when I myself am not, I sort of feel a little bit of a fraud. So today we'll be looking at things slightly differently. I'm going to go back and dust off my old CV and see, you know, in my past lives, like, what exposure did I have to manufacturing that can resonate with me, that I can bring a message through to you today? So I cast my mind back as far as I can, and the first thing that comes to me, my exposure to manufacturing, was actually as the senior lead product developer for Lego. Now, of course, this was a self-appointed position. I was only about 6 years old, and it was confined to my family playroom. But what it gave me was this great sense of I can create something, I can build something from what looks like seemingly useless pieces of plastic. And with that, my effort and time and a piece of paper, instructions, I can create something that blew my 6-year-old mind. That's power. I got a bit old, I grew out of Lego. Actually, I lie, I've never grown out of Lego. I don't think anyone can grow out of Lego. It really is something for everyone. But I did, let's say my interests diverged a bit. And I was in my teen years in the 90s, and took a little bit of a dark twist and turn towards the underground world of digital piracy. So my brother had just bought one of those CD disc burners back in the day. They were quite a thing, you know, it wasn't even in your laptop, it was a separate external thing. And it wasn't long before we had friends and family lining up and saying they wanted a copy of this and a copy of that and a mix of this. So obviously my entrepreneurial mind got ticking, and you know, it wasn't long before I threw myself headfirst into this whole manufacturing process, which is obviously sourcing raw materials, blank CDs, designing and developing the product, you know, making those mixed song lists and the covers for your CD, writing it all out. We had to do order management, so dealing with customers, which were just friends and family back then. There's obviously scheduling, production scheduling. There was the manufacturing itself, so not only getting the CD burnt, but actually putting on those, those round labels, inkjet printed, that always blur when you put some water on. But eventually packaging it and distributing it. So huge lessons in that. But obviously, thanks to Mr. Steve Jobs and the iPod, digital devices and MP3s put a big nail in the coffin over there. So such was the end of my manufacturing career at that point. But it really touches on a number of other things. I spent some time in the UK after graduating at UCT. For those of you who are familiar with the UK or with Europe, and you have a penchant for Swedish design and affordable furniture, you'll know where I'm going with this. IKEA is, it's an iconic development or iconic manufacturer. They create insane products that actually allow for the user themselves to be part of that process as well. So I spent many an hour twisting an Allen key only to come up and realize that quality assurance is a very important part of the process. So coming back to South Africa, I missed the country too much to stay away. And I was blessed to have 2 kids. I've now got 2 kids. One's in grade 7 and one's not grade 7, she's 7 in grade 1. And her younger brother is 5 years old. And the 2 of them are, and I'm sure that if there are any moms in the audience, you'll be the first to say that you are a creator, a maker, a manufacturer of so many things. Just in this last month, lunchboxes, I think I was the sole producer of about 50 lunchboxes every single day. Birthday cakes, all that kind of stuff. There are times when you really need to realize that a manufacturer's job is better done when it's outsourced. So I learned that with the birthday cake, which had to be 2 layers and a dolphin popping out this year. So anyway, I'll keep that on board for next year. The point I'm trying to make, and it's certainly no disrespect to you here in the audience today, significant amount of value in South Africa, in Africa, across the world comes through our manufacturers. And I'm certainly not sharing my experiences to disrespect them in the slightest, but rather to seek some sort of commonality. And that commonality, which, there are a few, but what I've seen through my brushes with manufacturing, and of course what the manufacturing industry is all about, it really comes down to the simple word of process. Process is the most important thing within this industry and many others. And in fact, yesterday on my trip up to Johannesburg, I was on my flight, I spoke to a couple of people, I spoke to my Uber driver, my hotel receptionist, and all of them, I told them I was speaking here today, and I asked them, what's manufacturing? What does it mean to you? Without fail, all 5 of them said it's process. That's what manufacturing is. And so, that makes it easier for me to stand up and speak through a microphone at an audience. I don't feel like such a fraud anymore because it's something I can relate to. It's my organization, in my capacity as CEO of my organization, we create digital experiences. We allow for our organization, client organizations, to create and interact with their stakeholders. So that's their employees, their suppliers, their customers, their shareholders. It essentially is this idea of taking raw content, raw materials, applying technology and human effort to it to come out with something that's incredibly valued. It's a process. But more than that, it speaks of a process that we've come to know as digital transformation. And that's so relevant in today's age. It's what's really going to take us forward. So the ironic thing, though, when I did a little bit of researching around manufacturing, the industry that I don't know so much about, there was an IBM report, and it came up and it said, prior to COVID, 67% of global manufacturing companies were not interested in doing any sort of digital transformation. In fact, 92% of their decision makers were convinced that the only focus that a manufacturing company should have, the sole focus for most of their resources, would be to improve operational efficiencies. So that makes sense, right? You want to be cheaper, you want to be faster, you want to be better. But fast forward 2.5 years, and these are some of the most crazy years we've just experienced, and we're coming out the back end of this pandemic, and things have changed somewhat. 67% of global manufacturing companies now say that they were forced to go through digital transformation. They might not have wanted to, but they've had to, and it's what's helped them sustain themselves. And of those 92% that said that they wanted to focus purely on operational efficiencies, that number's fallen down to 65% now. And in its place at the top spot of what to really consider as a manufacturing company, that's been replaced by what we call operational resilience. And again, it's digital transformation. It's making sure that every part of the business, not just the production line, but every part of the business is sustainable, is stable. And we do that through clear communications and the right technologies. In itself, it's a process, and it's essentially just 5 steps, really. Like any process, we need to start off with a purpose. Process without purpose is just a mess. So start off with a purpose, and that really means having a goal. Why are we doing this? You know, does it suit our company? Does it need to happen in our company? And once the purpose has been defined, we can carry on with the other steps. The second step is bringing the people on board. So that's all your stakeholders, engaging with them, making sure you manage their expectations around what's going to happen as you go through this process of transformation. The third step is then with regards to the process itself and the planning around that process. So knowing what steps and articulating them in such a way that nobody can get lost along the way. And only on the fourth step, we actually get to the technology part. Only then we start looking at these things like 4IR and Web3. And you know, you've heard all the words. It's machine learning, it's AI, it's robotics, it's automation, it's NFTs, it's crypto, it's blockchain, it's all of these things which are so confusing if that's not the industry that you're operating in, that it almost seems ridiculous to entertain the thought. And so, with that in mind, you know, we say, right, the fourth step is product, it is technology, but only once we've gone through those first 3 and we then get to a place where we're able to choose the right technology. Because not every company needs every single new technology that comes into the market. And I think there's a lot of panic going on to sort of clutch at straws and make sure you do. And then once, you know, process has been done according to a purpose and people are all aligned and we've used all these technology products and platforms to help us get there, it really comes down to the whole idea of it being digital means we can measure it. It's taking that data and analyzing it and feeding it straight back. So no longer is this process a straight line, but rather a circle, and it continually feeds itself. So yeah, I mean, keeping it very short and brief, I think without diminishing the respect that I have for the manufacturing industry, and obviously with great excitement for what's going to come, I'd love to, you know, sum it up by saying we are all manufacturers at the end of the day, and it's understanding how to implement those processes with the help of technology that we make progress. Process is progress. Thank you.
Barbara, thank you so much for sharing that with us. As you say, it's all about a new way of thinking. Barbara Mallison, CEO of Obami, Create, Monetize, Analyze. I hope it's helped you think about how you can expand your market, your value chain, and digitization, how you can do that to grow even in the informal sector. Barbara Mallison, CEO of Obami, Create, Monetize, Analyze. So let's get into the thrust of the conversation now, see how we can optimize and create competitiveness, take advantage. I'm going to invite onto the stage for panel discussion this afternoon, Nandi Klaba, the Vice President, Kenya, South Africa Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I'd also like to invite to join us, George Swolela, SA United Business Council Group Chairman and President, Dr. Shahid Faludzin from the Center for CSIR, and Dilly Naidu, who's an industry expert. And I'll just give you a brief, while they come up, a brief look at their own bios, the kind of work that they've done, so that you can follow the kind of conversations we're having with them. So let me just introduce then, as he comes up on stage, George Sibulela. He is the Group Chairman and President, as I mentioned, of the SAUBC. He is also Chief Executive of Sipvest Holdings and Global Financial Services Group, a member of the strategic investment of various companies. He is an ExCo member of various entities, including head of empowerment division at ABSA. He serves on boards such as Sanlam Private Wealth, Eskom Holdings, United Arab Emirates, need I go on. Dr. Shahid Faluddin, Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. He's also joining us with 20 years of experience across the diverse range of industries, having worked with manufacturing, oil and gas, power generation, including nuclear industry. He works at the CSIR in the manufacturing cluster. He's been involved in the circular economy, including promoting and establishing circular economy within South African manufacturing sector. Dilly Naidu, industry expert, CEO of Madala Group, an organization focused on developing excellence through people. So he is very strongly motivated by thought leadership, job creation, business sustainability. Dilly also currently serves on the Presidential Advisory Group chaired by President of the Republic of South Africa, Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa. And as I mentioned, please let's also welcome Ms. Nandi Xaba, President of the Kenya South Africa Chamber of Commerce and Industry, also is going to take part in our conversation today. So I'll have a seat and then we can just welcome them formally.
Are you? You good? Missing one member. I don't know it's the truth, but this light is too strong.
The lights are,
This light.
yeah, it may,
So strong.
I thought I was the only thorn amongst the roses, so thank you very much for that, Ms. Right, so let's talk about this. We're going to look at the critical growth path in the future of manufacturing. Once again, perhaps if I could just introduce to my left, are you comfortable with first names?
Absolutely.
Dilly, who is to my immediate left, George, and Shahid right next to him, and Nandi is right there to the furthest. So perhaps let me just first start with you, George, as president of SAUBC Group. So the work that you're doing, currently importing, you'll explain a little bit more about it, but I think we as a country, we're importing more than our exports do, and that is a big problem. So what opportunities are there for Africa, particularly in working with other African countries, that we have not exploited, especially in increasing exports and toning down on the imports from the North rather than Africa? I think you should be fine now. Can we just test that mic? I can grab the... All right, let's give it another try.
Yeah, that's better. Firstly, thank you for inviting us to be part of this occasion. I represent the South African United Business Confederation, which represents a diverse businesses from different industry sectors. And our role in this country is to do nothing else but to become a key player on policy advocacy in relation to ensure that the economy of this country, including for the African countries, it grows to the level that we want. I think we're all very much aware that we are challenged with this unemployment rate and this poverty that keeps on growing all the time. And we thought it's very appropriate to become a key player in making sure that we challenge any other policy that we believe is regressing in terms of the growth of the economy. So when you talk imports, it's in the center of not only South Africa, but the Africa in totality. One of my colleagues from the organization, in fact, all of them, have mentioned the issue of Africa, South Africa to become a consumer. If you travel to China, for example, they would tell you that one of our biggest consumers is Africa, and proudly so. Is it something wrong? There's nothing wrong about that. Is it something wrong that we become a total consumer and not manufacture anything? There is something silly there, because you cannot deal with unemployment without manufacturing. That's a fact. How do we deal with ensuring that we don't import quite a lot? We have to import one way or the other, but we create our own industries. Just to give you an example, if you look at the mineral resources in Africa in totality, coltan, for example, as a product, which is consumed by all the cell phone industries in the world, which are not domiciled in Africa, it's produced in DRC. If you look at South Africa on the platinum, it's produced here in South Africa. It comes back beneficiated to be consumed double the price here in South Africa. Where's the challenge? The challenge is one. We as policy organizations have to fight these tariffs. We have to ensure that our local manufacturers are given the best import duties, export duties that they can get. They have the facility and the funding capability to be able to export the goods. Because without good grants and capital that is going to be invested in those manufacturing industries, there's no way you can export. Currency devaluation, as we know, it also helped quite a lot in countries where they realize they've got challenges to export. And I think that's the weakness of our own governments in totality in Africa, that we accept to make our own countries to become a dumping countries. And that must stop. And we must fight for it.
So, Nandi, let me come to you, just particularly from your perspective, South Africa, Kenya, substituting global resources. I think during COVID, Kenya saw a lot of that, particularly with one of the major products that you export, and that is cut flowers. There's also tea, coffee, etc. So what lessons can be learned by also further capacitating a country like South Africa to be able to gain ground? Because what we're doing here is trying to build, facilitate greater intra-Africa trade.
Is it working?
I think yes.
Thank you so much. And I would also like to put through the apology of the president of Kenya South Africa Business Chamber. He couldn't be here today. I think Kenya is big in agriculture. Most of its economy it's based on agriculture. And I think we've got something to learn from them. Looking at agro-processing and with what they are doing, the processes that they are doing, because it's serving a lot of, I think it's about 33% of their GDP in terms of agriculture. So we've got a lot to learn from them, and they're not farming the way we are farming, and it's an opportunity that we can have some exchanged programs that we can have with them. It's something that we are working on to say, Kenya, what is it that you are doing right? Because Kenya is sitting at number 3 behind Nigeria and South Africa. So we need to learn from them. And we are almost the same as Kenya, our lifestyle, a lot of things, even our language, So there's a lot that we can learn. And also looking at Kenya, they also get your climate change, they also get droughts, but still, they do make it out of that. And so it shows that their processes that they have in place, they are working for them. And when you look at the Eastern Bloc, they are sitting at the top of the Eastern Bloc in terms of their economy. So basically on agriculture. So we've got land in South Africa. What is it that we can do with them? And do we always have to take fruits and all that stuff from other countries? Why can't we utilize our own African countries that are into farming already? Kenya is doing your coffee, is big in tea. So why can't we tap into what is it that they are doing? And they are also exporting to other European countries. So it's a matter of now, the relationships that we have with them, the bilateral agreements that we have with them, I think we need to take advantage and also expand the import and the export between the two countries. Looking at manufacturing, Kenya is sitting at only 1,000 companies that are into manufacturing. What is it that we can learn from those companies that we can gain some experience and educational background from them? Because I think where we are sitting as the Kenyan, I'm from South Africa, I'm not Kenya.
Of course.
But where we are sitting in a good space because we are growing. Our GDP is like growing. And I think in 2020, yes, we were rated number 3, but also there was time in 2015 where Kenya was looking at 19% growth in terms of their GDP. So there is something that they're doing well, but their backbone is agriculture.
Shahid, let's hear from you, circular manufacturing. What exactly are we talking about here in layman's terms, and how can we use it to bolster our ground, not only in South Africa, but sharing best practices with other African countries?
Yes, I think it's important to understand, firstly, what circular manufacturing is really referring to. So it's really part of the circular economy concept or model, if you like.
If I could just ask that we increase your volume a little bit.
Sure.
So that,
Should I move this up?
yes, that's much better. Sorry. Yes.
Sorry about that. So, circular economy really is embodied by 3 key principles. The first is designing out waste and pollution in terms of manufacturing processes. The second is keeping materials and products in circulation within the manufacturing value chain. And the last is what we call regenerating natural systems. And it's really about preserving our natural resources, environment, etc., via this circular economy, principles that we're talking about. So these 3 principles, if we start to adopt them within the local and, let's say, African manufacturing sectors, they hold tremendous potential in terms of economic growth, creating new business.
I'm not sure if they can hear you at the back. Is everybody comfortable? Are you able to hear?
Is it
no,
too soft?
Unfortunately, yes.
Your voice is
Just
better?
speak up a
Sorry.
little bit, please.
Perhaps I'm talking sideways.
No,
Okay, I
it's-
apologize. So yeah, these 3 principles hold tremendous potential in terms of unlocking new business opportunities and creating more sustainable economies and preserving our natural resources and so forth. So if we look at South Africa, for example, we just touched on the issue of imports and exports. South Africa is a long-standing challenge in terms of being very dependent on imports of finished goods and exports of unbeneficiated mineral resources. And the circular economy really, the circular economy principles can be applied across the board, not only within manufacturing, mining, agriculture, etc., but specifically within the mining and manufacturing sectors. There's huge opportunity there to implement circular economy principles in terms of our mining processes, if you like. The word processes has come up. It's obviously a very critical aspect to the whole manufacturing value chain and mining value chain. And also then the recovery of critical raw materials in terms of mining processes, coming up with innovative mining and minerals processing technologies, particularly, for example, now with the high value, increasing value of our raw materials, PGMs, critical battery type related raw materials.
So, Dilly, may I jump in and just say, let's use a practical example. If the Future Manufacturing Africa Trade Fair Summit, for instance, how would we best utilize that to bring to life some of these basic ideas that you say we need to grasp to be able to take advantage of it?
Yes, I guess it provides a platform where we can demonstrate, practical examples of how circular economy practice has come into as manifested in terms of real life cases. So CSR conducted a study last year, and we looked at global case studies and benchmarks in terms of circular economy models, practice, and implementation, particularly within the European Union, Asian countries, and so forth. And from that study, it's clear that there's definite benefit and massive potential for us to make inroads in terms of our future manufacturing outlook and vision, if you like. I think we also identified, there's lots of challenges in the sense that there's a lack of awareness. One of the struggles is access to finance, particularly from smaller companies. There's a lack of buy-in within companies, particularly at the executive and management level. That needs to, there needs to be more commitment in terms of rolling out the circular economy, adoption of circular economy thinking and practice within companies.
Dilly, so you've been doing this for quite a while, and I overheard you earlier on speak about how you still have the same concept documents from, I think, 18 years ago. Where are the failures? What are we failing to capitalize on, given the fact that, conditions are changing? We're not stagnant. There's digitization, and agro processes themselves are changing. So looking back, what has changed, what needs to change, and what still needs to be accurately conceptualized?
Thank you. I'd like to make a few global opening statements around manufacturing. I studied what happened to Japan through manufacturing post the devastation of Hiroshima and the use of technology and skills development. I also studied 30 years ago South Korea, and South Korea could not spell manufacturing. Today, if you look at Hyundai, Kia, Samsung, LG, are global brands. So what are the learnings that we as Africans can take from some of those countries and those private sectors where government creates the environment, the regulatory environment, while private sector? Africa, we've heard the stats of the 1.5 billion and all the billions of potential to grow. It is blessed with the natural resources, examples of Congo and what's happening, many examples across Africa. It is blessed with a young population. We have created some years ago to complement the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, for example, in the automotive sector. They are all in this country. Government has created a wonderful incentive for BMW, Mercedes, and the likes to invest in this country, as opposed to any other country, with respect to them. They're not investing here because they like you and I or Africa. It makes compelling economic sense for them to be here, despite all the challenges we have. The challenge that we have is that we are not going below that in what we call tier 1, 2, 3s. These are the actual Africans that have the potential to manufacture and be part of the ecosystem. That can be replicated to the rail, to the energy sector, and many sectors. So what are the learnings? In the South African context, the lessons we've learned is through the Department of Trade and Industry, we have a policy that says by 2035, that's 13 years from now, we will have 60% components in our automotive vehicles. Have a look at your vehicles today and tell me how many components are made in South Africa. So how will you in 13 years get from almost zero to 60% components? We have developed methodologies of how you go about doing that, called an MAP program, standing for Manufacturing Accelerator Program, to enable the existing manufacturers and new manufacturers that are going to come into the ecosystem. Because if I'm BMW, Mercedes, you have to comply to my quality standards, my pricing relative to the global. So these are real challenges. These are lessons. So with respect to DTI, creating a policy is fantastic. But the implementation of the policy at the grassroots level for manufacturers, and there's many opportunities. The other stat that we have is the amount of jobs that we can create. Just looking at state-owned enterprises, the PRASA, Denel, Eskom, and the likes, we can create over 2 million jobs in 10 years.
So I'm looking at the summit next year, and we know that the Africa Automation Technology Fair is going to be very much involved. So just building on what you've already said, are there any other new areas of manufacturing that we can look at to capitalize on that?
I think we must be very careful. I wrote an article, and I have it here, on the 24th of March when the country closed down. And the article headline said, why should South Africa, in this case I'll say Africa, not put all its manufacturing eggs in the China basket? As an opening statement. China is great at manufacturing, so is India, South Korea, and Thailand. What we as South Africans should do at this fair is not compete with China, is to look at particular niche areas, given our natural resources and our capabilities for skills development and knowledge transfer, and pick a few of those areas where we can become global leaders. The analogy I'll draw is, if you take the Swedes like Volvo, Volvo is synonymous with safety. People buy a Volvo because they believe it's the safest car in the world. And I'll give you similar examples like, so that is what we should be doing. Take Bangladesh, they're growing at 6% per annum, year on year. Doing what? All you see on TV is Bangladesh is a poor, starving country. They are competing with the best of the best in the textiles industry. And that's my advice of what we should be doing here is not all things to all people in manufacturing, but the lessons we can learn is from what the previous Afrikaners did with the likes of Denel, etc., for innovation. Mining was #1 in this country. Australia is #1 in the world today. So through the CSIR, through the Mandela Mining Precinct, that's looking at unique opportunities for innovation to solve African problems in the mining sector.
So George, let's solve some of those problems. So we're promoting intra-African trade, we are working towards creating a single currency, but some of those lagging behind problems remain, let alone the fact that not all of the agreements have been signed. So, and we are in entrenched relationships with some of those people that we import materials from. There's mention of China, there's Europe. So how do we promote intra-Africa trade while creating niche markets for each of us using our own resources? As there's been a mention, we all have different strengths. The Central African Republic, Kenya, Burundi, South Africa. So how do we create that single market that grows while being mindful of the agreements that are in place, but still ensuring that we are boosting growth in the sectors that we've already got a stranglehold on?
Look, it's a very important question. Maybe before I respond to your question directly, I need to highlight something very important. the capacity of, which is quite very interesting because, and these discussions we have had a number of times, particularly in South Africa with the South African government, to say, if indeed there is an intention to stimulate what we call the new emerging manufacturers who are typically industrialists, and more so black industrialists, as an example, which applies in every country. Why is government procurement spend is not utilized to leverage this establishment of these industries? For example, if you have an entrepreneur who would want to manufacture, for example, in this country, as an example, all condoms in this country are imported, which is quite very funny. The consumption of condoms is close to 1 billion condoms in this country in a particular 1 year. Now, how does it become difficult that the Department of Health would not give a contract for 10 years or 15 years to a manufacturer to establish a condom manufacturer at the back of the offtake of government? That is not it's not a rocket science, it's just a common sense. And similarly, in many other commodities, we can utilize that power of government procurement to establish many manufacturers sustainably.
But isn't what Future Manufacturing Africa Trade Fair Summit all about, George? Isn't that why?
Well, I'm emphasizing that the message of today that we must take forward is to encourage our own governments to say, let's look at making this Africa to become school of excellence in establishing these high-class manufacturers that can compete with the world, because the risk starts from your own country. And if that risk is mitigated, because remember, you can't talk manufacturing and exclude capital. And you would be able to raise capital because you have a procurement source that is sustainable. That's common sense. The Africa Trade Free Agreement has been, it's really a new process. And I think we exaggerate it on the basis of the following. We shouldn't discount that each and every country has its own challenges. No matter even the agreement is in existence, there's a number of few things that we have to get correct. Countries are not equal in terms of economy, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of telecoms, and so on, and the financial systems, and so on and so on. So, we have to identify the specifics that will accelerate this trade, this free trade. I can tell you with the border management, the visas, it might take other people so long in order to go to one country to another. And that's a nature, because that country doesn't agree that process to be allowed. And therefore, I think the challenge is policymakers should continue and look at all the key critical aspects that will make this free trade agreement to become much more smooth and successful.
Nandi, so transport yourself then to next year and what you're seeing in terms of, just picking up on what George here is saying, those nuts and bolts that we still need to focus on, particularly in terms of operational processes. And within the prism of 4IR, this is what we are hedging a lot of our bets on. So what do you see at this summit that you're thinking that we really need to focus our attention on?
I think the summit is a great initiative, but at the same time, we need to look at our own South African small SMMEs that want to partake in this summit. Are they catered for? Because what we are seeing, it's same people going to the summits over and over again. And we are seeing the big guys always in these summits because the small guy on the ground doesn't have the finances. So the access to finance is quite critical. At the same time, go to townships, go to your industrial space, the ones that are not in good conditions. You get your SMMEs that are there, but they don't have relevant your compliance documents and all that stuff. How do we assist them so that they can also partake in these summits? And I think we need to define who is supposed to be in these summits. Is it your big guys again, or are we taking from the ground roots those who are manufacturing doors? There are people who are manufacturing doors. There are people who are manufacturing aluminium in the townships. So how are we going to assist them for them to be part of these summits? And I think we can have all the summits in the world that we can have, but it comes back to access to finance. Because if, let's say, next time it's in Morocco or it's somewhere, where am I going to get the money to go there? Where am I going to get the money to buy the stands? And all those things. And also, if I receive a huge order, am I going to be able to manufacture for that order? So there's a lot of things that needs to be taken care of before we can say, South Africa, we are ready to go to the summits. And also, I think on the Kenyan side, it's a matter of Kenyans, what is it that you can loan to South Africa in terms of your expertise? Let's tap into them. I mean, they're big in farming. They're also big in ICT. They're big in steel. Why can't we create relationships that some of the things, what he's saying right now about condoms, earlier on I saw bins, as in like your bins that we cook, they're being imported from China. With all the land that we have in South Africa, we are importing bins. I think if we really want to create growth in South Africa, if we really want to create jobs in South Africa, we need to look at a different approach. We'll need to look at a practical approach to say, what is it that we can do? And, on paper, everything is good. But in terms of practicality, what is it that needs to happen in terms of implementation?
Shahid, just a final word from you on this. The informal sector, I mentioned it earlier on. If we're talking about a circular economy and sustainability is at the center of that, or plays a big role in that. From a regulatory perspective, are we ready? Are we looking at the right things in order to bringing a larger market, particularly, as I said, from the informal sector?
I think we are. If you look at the last...
if I could ask you to please speak up again, Shahid?
Sure, yes. There's been a lot of policy developments from government side in terms of localization, industrial development, economic development. And a lot of the policy measures, documentation, plans, etc., it's becoming more common now for them to mention circular economy and, require circular economy measures to be implemented. So I think that coupled with the emphasis on localization, as a kind of economic driver, if you like. I think some of the colleagues were just touching on that as well. I think it puts us in a kind of, at least from a policy-driven point of view, a state of readiness to start implementing circular economy measures, so to say, or adopting it more in a more broader sense within our economic plan and the steps we take, particularly from a manufacturing point of view. So in that sense, I think we're ready. But as I was saying earlier, I think in terms of finance, in terms of understanding of what circular economy is really about, and that sort of thing, I think we may not be as ready as we might need to be. I think is also what our study at CSR has also indicated to us is that the larger companies who have been in existence for longer periods, they have more access to finance, resources. They have, a number of them, particularly within the packaging industry, plastics industry, your larger companies have already developed quite mature circular economy type measures or business plans and strategies. And a number of them have already been in implementation for several years or more than a decade. So they've made great strides and they've seen, huge benefits, but from a business point of view, growth, profits point of view, and so forth. But smaller companies are struggling. Lack of access to finance, and other kind of challenges. So I think there needs to be a lot more groundwork and support. But there needs to be probably integration between the larger companies and the smaller guys. I think Delhi was touching on this tier 2, tier 3. So that these problems are quite spread across the economic spectrum in terms of their challenges.
So I'm just going to give you all, let's make it a minute each if you can. If you go a little over, maybe a minute and a half each as a final word. On the advice that you'd give, there'll be, I believe, 5,000 decision makers at Future Manufacturing Africa Trade Fair Summit next year. So the advice that you'd give them in terms of new innovations, new solutions, how to go about it to improve their business or even to make themselves appear on the radar. Dilly, just your final word on that?
I think one of the speakers here touched on it previously. Applying technology for technology's sake is not going to solve problems. And I've been in technology for over 45 years. So firstly, to understand what business I'm going to be on and what is the purpose of me being in the business. IKEA was mentioned, and I lived in Europe. IKEA is a do-it-yourself. Why don't we build an equivalent of an IKEA in each one of the African countries? Because people will require to consume and buy goodies that IKEA sells. Why do we have to look to IKEA? We have timber. We have a whole lot of goodies in Africa. I'm using that as one simple example. We can replicate that to all the other resources that we have.
And that's all you have? You still have another 30 seconds if you want, no?
I would say I'm very excited about this. As you could tell, I'm passionate about this stuff. I've worked in manufacturing. I had a business in China, in Donjon in Shenzhen province. We had 194 employees. But you know who we were supplying? AT&T, one of the largest telcos in the world. Verizon, the second largest telco. Deutsche Telekom. From a little place there, why can we not do similar things in South Africa and Africa?
All right, and George?
Yeah, I think from my side, I do believe that the future of the success of the manufacturing should not ignore the process and the strategy around 4IR, which is very, very critical. 4IR is not about technology. 4IR, it's about technology and the people. That's very critical to note, that we need to upskill, we need to reskill. Manufacturing has a lifespan 5 years. If you don't reskill, you don't upskill, you're out of the game. So that's very critical to note. You need to innovate on a continuous basis. If you don't innovate, you will be left behind. Your manufacturing, depending on the industry sector, would not make it. You can see it has become now what we call FMCGs, fast-moving consumer goods. You have to continuously innovate and innovate. You need to strengthen your network between yourself and the suppliers, because you can't grow your manufacturing plant without the suppliers. And you need to look after your bank. You can't succeed without looking after the bank. Pay the dues. If you pay the dues, you have enough money to reinvest, and then the growth comes in.
Oh, thanks. Shahid?
Yeah, I think there needs to be, more broader adoption of circular economy thinking by businesses locally. It should become part of their business strategy and planning. There's a number of circular economy business models, if you like, that companies can look to and adopt in terms of their business operations. The circular economy principles and thinking from a design manufacturing point of view offers, and there's plenty of examples globally which we can learn from. There's lots of opportunities for developing innovative manufacturing processes, technologies, or even adopting those locally. to enhance our, businesses, grow the businesses, increase jobs, and so forth. So I think generally, in my view, there needs to be increased understanding and adoption of circular economy.
Thank you. And Nandi?
On my side, I think these are beautiful initiatives, but as well, we need to equip our educational side of it. Because at the end of the day, the people who are supposed to be participating from these events, they come from somewhere. I think our economy needs to be aligned with the education in our country, but also at the same time, our country is very young. We've got youth, we've got women. We need to equip those people. We need to equip our youth. So education plays an important role when it comes to initiations like this, because over time, those are the people that are going to be partaking, those are the people that are going to be driving such initiations. So on my side, I think also e-commerce, it cannot be a once-off. Can we have a platform where on a daily basis there's trades, on a daily basis there's something happening. We cannot be meeting only once a year or once in 2 years or 3 years. So I think also implement the e-commerce side of it, where every day, so that when we meet, when we convene, then there are stories to be told, to say over the years, this is what has happened, these are the people that have benefited from this program. So on my side, education is very key, and also if we can embrace the technology, if we can embrace the 4IR, and also making people to understand that it's okay, the 5G is here, the technology is here. It doesn't mean that there'll be job losses, but it means that now we need to move concurrently with the technologies and processes that are there.
So as you've heard from the speakers, many areas of opportunities, many gaps that we still need to fill, skills that we have to create, but please give them a warm round of applause, much appreciated.